When you wake up in the morning and wash your face, brush your teeth, or before heading out, you can easily look at yourself either in a mirror or through the front camera of your phone. But what if mirrors never existed? I mean, really, how would you feel if you could not see your own face clearly even once in your entire life? So how did ancient people see themselves without mirrors? How did those ancient people who lived thousands of years ago, with no phones, no mirrors, no cameras, see themselves for the very first time? Or could they even see themselves at all? As humans, when we say myself, a face immediately comes to mind. But that face is not actually what you see directly. It is a reflection you see in a mirror or on a camera. In other words, we can never see our own true face with the naked eye without any reflective surface. For a person living in the ancient era, this situation was much more drastic because they had no phones, no glass, no shiny plastic, nothing at all. So how did these people see themselves for the very first time? As always, humanity set out with a sense of curiosity to find answers to the questions in their minds. Ancient humans discovered, albeit by chance, that water is reflective. A calm lake, a still riverbank, or a puddle reflects light and shows the silhouette of the person leaning over it. Just imagine, a person leaning down to drink water suddenly sees a human silhouette on the surface of the water. They must have been frightened and surprised at that first moment. Imagine being all alone, and while drinking water, another person is drinking water with you from the lake. But, of course, water was not a permanent solution. First of all, when the wind blew, the image was completely distorted and rippled. You couldn't see anything clearly, and your reflection looked warped, almost like a filter effect. Secondly, you couldn't find still water everywhere, which made it quite difficult for people living especially in desert regions or mountainous terrains. Furthermore, light does not hit the water the same way at all hours of the day, meaning you still might not be able to see yourself properly at night or on cloudy days. As days went by, people noticed that certain stones, when polished, would shine and create an image on their surface, even if it was blurry. The most famous example here is the volcanic glass we call obsidian. In modern-day Turkey, in the Çatalhöyük region, archaeologists found polished obsidian pieces dating back to 6000 BC. Just think about it. 8,000 years ago, people were trying to polish obsidian using their own means. Obsidian is naturally a dark, glassy, hard, and difficult to break volcanic rock. When thoroughly rubbed and polished, its surface becomes smooth and can reflect light to a certain degree. Although the image wasn't very clear, this was a functional method. It appeared more like shadows, contours, and a dark reflection. In other words, even though it didn't have the clarity of today's mirrors, it was used as a method to at least get a rough idea. As years passed and people learned metalworking, they were able to make progress in this field. First, they started using copper. Primitive mirrors made of copper emerged in the Egyptian and Mesopotamian regions. However, since copper is a somewhat soft metal, it scratched easily and tarnished quickly. Then, people discovered something. By adding a little tin to copper, they obtained a much harder and more durable alloy called bronze. This was a true revolution. So, how did they make bronze mirrors? First, the metal was hammered into a thin disc, and then this disc was polished for hours, or even days, using sand, leather, or special stones. Imagine a craftsman sitting for days, rubbing the piece of bronze in his hand until a reflection formed on it. This means that owning a bronze mirror in that era truly required a massive amount of labor. Bronze mirrors existed in Egypt, Greece, China, and even in the ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica. Bronze mirrors were found particularly in the tombs of pharaohs in Egypt, which shows that a mirror was not just an item for daily use, but also a status symbol and a sacred object believed to be needed even in the afterlife. In other words, we can say that for an ancient Egyptian, a mirror was something like today's luxury cars, both functional and for display. Of course, these bronze mirrors weren't perfect either. The image was generally yellowish, a bit blurry, and distorted. There was no clear image like today. It was more of a structure where you could only see yourself roughly. As days passed and new methods emerged, it was finally time for glass mirrors. Mirrors made of glass in the sense we actually know them appeared at a much later period. The Romans had made some attempts, trying to produce primitive glass mirrors by backing the glass with a thin metal layer, usually lead or tin. However, these were also of poor quality, small, and expensive. The real big breakthrough took place in the late Middle Ages in the city of Venice, Italy, specifically on the island of Murano. The masters there developed a special technique using a mixture of mercury and tin to produce truly clear, bright, and high-quality glass mirrors. This technology was considered so valuable that the Venetian government protected this information like a state secret. Artisans were forbidden from leaving the island, and it was even said that those who leaked the secret would face severe punishments. In short, mirror technology was protected with strict secrecy at that time. Actually, humans had discovered another way to see themselves at the very beginning, and that was shadows. On a sunny day, you can see the shape and movements of your shadow cast on the ground. Of course, this doesn't give you facial details, but it would at least give you a general idea about your body posture, height, and movements. Some anthropologists believe that shadow paintings, or shadow plays, which are among the earliest forms of art, might have also been born from this curiosity of self-observation. Additionally, shiny metal weapons and shields were also useful. Especially warriors could see their own reflections in their polished bronze shields before battle. Perhaps a soldier, before going to war, would look at his face on the shiny surface of his shield to make one last check. This can be thought of as the thousands of years old version of our modern habit of taking one last look in the mirror before leaving the house. But were there natural reflectors of higher quality than a puddle? Yes, actually there were. For instance, certain crystal stones, especially quartz and similar minerals, could also reflect light at certain angles. Moreover, some pieces of ice also served as interesting reflectors, particularly for communities living in polar regions. The flat and smooth surface of ice could create a blurry reflection under sunlight. Thus, different communities discovered different natural mirrors depending on their geography. There is also this interesting detail. In some tribal societies, people intentionally turned looking into water into a ritual. That is, it wasn't just about coincidentally going to the water's edge to see oneself. They deliberately looked into the water during certain religious or spiritual ceremonies to try to communicate with their own soul or the souls of their ancestors. The earliest foundations of the mirrors we easily access today were followed by the steps taken with obsidians by the Çatalhöyük civilization in the Anatolian geography thousands of years ago. Then the trials with lead sheets by the Romans, and later by the Italians producing the first flawless reflecting mirrors by applying an amalgam, a mixture of tin and mercury, to the back of clear glass. Perhaps in ancient times, people cared more about what kind of person they were rather than how they looked, don't you think?